Welcome to another episode of Sketchy Ideas, the live point-counterpoint video podcast where we illustrate, debate, and even talk about concepts that are surrounding leadership, business, personal development, and a whole bunch of other crazy things that may make you think twice before you try it. Hi, I'm Brad James.
I'm Michael Rampolla.
And in today's episode of Sketchy Ideas, Michael is going to go over a very significant concept that we're all dealing with right now. It's this thing called VUCA, and that's not the VUCA burger or Boca burger, as many of you might think. It's VUCA. What does that stand for, Michael?
Thanks. Glad you asked. So VUCA stands for it's an acronym. You got me so far. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. I'll do it again. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. That sounds like the world we're living in, as Brad described.
A little bit, I mean, there's this thing going on called COVID.
It's a thing.
Maybe you've heard of it. Yeah. I think that could cause some of those things,
No doubt. Definitely features of the current environment. And it's an idea that's getting a lot of tread, a lot of traction and press lately, but it's not a new idea. It's going to feel like a new idea to those that are experiencing these things for the first time. But let me go way back, quick origin story. VUCA, the concept, actually originated post-Cold War. So it originated in the U.S. Army College. Students came up with the term to describe what was the world like in the post-Cold War environment. So we're going back pretty far. And I think it's it's insightful to know that these things that we're dealing with, this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, those are not new elements of our environment. They're definitely just heightened, and I think they go in cycles. But right now we're in a cycle where those four things are certainly heightened and in great supply, to say the least.
That makes sense. I mean, it is kind of a cold war. It's getting chilly out, right? There's these tiny little
there you go.
Viruses marching around trying to take people out. I mean, I can see it,
Yeah.
We'll go with it.
Go with it. So let's talk about I want to explore each of the four ideas a little bit more. So let's start with the V, volatility. So what makes something volatile? The biggest feature of something being volatile is that it is unpredictable and it changes rapidly.
Unpredictability and changes rapidly.
Yep.
So we're not talking about like a pattern, right? Right.
Absolutely. Right.
Red
Lack
leather,
of a pattern.
Leather, red leather. All
that right. You see the one come after the other, right? 1, 2. What's my Fibonacci? 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Like that's predictable and changes predictably and changes incrementally. But if it's volatile, it is unpredictable and changes rapidly. The reason why is because it lacks stability. And I know it sounds kind of obvious when I put it that way, but why is it that way is going to come back later. So we'll add that feature for now. So it is because it lacks stability, it's unpredictable and changing rapidly. Talk about the outcome in a second. We'll come back around. So that's
okay.
The volatility part. Talk about uncertainty. What makes something uncertain? Yep. What makes something uncertain? It's in two things: indefinite and unknown.
That's how most people would describe my sketching abilities.
Uncertain, indefinite, unclear, absolutely. And okay, why? Because sometimes your sketching lacks specificity.
Or, just some creative genius that doesn't get that, it's not like yours.
Yeah, creative genius, unspecific, right, those can be misinterpreted often. Third feature is complexity. Things that are complex are intricate and complicated.
So are you talking like the details, right? So your drawings tend to have maybe some shading and some other things, but mine are literally straight lines.
Yours have the feature of simplicity, and things that are complex specifically lack simplicity. So if it lacks simplicity,
that's an insult.
I didn't. Listen, you have to talk to somebody else about how you feel about these connotations. I'm just telling you what the definitions.
That's next week's topic. Right?
That's right. You got it.
Fred's insecurity is next week's topic.
That's
All right,
yeah.
cool.
We'll save that one. You got it. Now, last thing is ambiguous or ambiguity. Things that are ambiguous have multiple meanings. And the second thing is that they are unclear or inexact.
So like they're gray.
Yeah, they're gray. They are a gray area. There's multiple ways to interpret it. And the reason that's happening is because a choice was not made.
Ah, my favorite, indecisive people.
You got it. Indecisive people are constantly finding themselves in ambiguous situations where there are multiple meanings. It's unclear and exact where they are, let alone what to do next. So take each of these, we'll put it underneath, take each of these and say, okay, so why is this happening? How do we know it's happening? And then, so what? So it's volatile. What's the big deal? Well, one of the key features of the so what of volatility is that change is often for the worse.
Okay.
We rarely describe something as volatile when it's changing for the better.
Interesting. Okay. So volatility, we're not talking market dynamics for those of you out there. This isn't cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, right? This is volatility in the negative sense. So
yeah,
this
absolutely.
is the flash floods. This is the forest fires. This is that type of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're starting to pick up on the fact that these things exist all around us, both in man-made constructs, stock market, and in nature. You mentioned floods and other natural disasters. So because things are unstable, flood is a great example. Landslide, right? Because it's unstable,
Yep.
It's going to be changing rapidly in an unpredictable way and often for the worse.
Is there a speed component with that volatility?
Well, that's changing rapidly. Okay. Absolutely. So it's the velocity, right? There's the constant velocity. Right. Then there's an accelerating velocity. So now is it changing rapidly?
We're getting into physics. Now we're getting into physics, Michael. You're over my head at least.
Okay,
Mr. Really Brian Omig, but
here's the other thing you need to remember: F equals ma. Everything comes from there. Force equals mass times acceleration. Then acceleration is a change in speed over time. So it's distance over time over time. So if something is changing rapidly and that speed itself is changing, we've got an exponential adjustment happening, which certainly leads to unpredictability.
Tutor out there, Michael is here. Call him up.
I can talk physics all day. Yeah, don't get me started. It's definitely one of my geek out topics. All right, so Brad's picking up on a lot of stuff coming from volatility. Let's see what he comes up with when I get to uncertainty. So uncertainty, what's the so what? Cannot be relied on.
Cannot be relied on.
So think about something you can rely on, and now take away that reliability.
So we're talking about, my car starts every time, but sometimes it doesn't. All right. Right. I get you.
Yep. By the way, that's the good way to know whether or not you have a male car or a female car, is whether or not it starts reliably and predictably.
That makes sense.
Have you ever gone through the naming game about name? You ever named your car?
I do. My last car was named Frank, and she was wonderful. She got me almost 300,000 miles out of that vehicle because I don't like to buy cars. And now Marge likes to talk to me a little bit every once in a while, but she seems to start most days.
There you go. Perfect. You've done this game before. I love it. All right. So cannot be relied on, especially noticeable when it used to be certain, right? If we just know it's never going to be certain, that's one thing. But when something becomes uncertain that used to be certain, like we used to rely on it, now we can't, that's when uncertainty becomes most impactful. Let's put it that way.
So this right now, as we're talking, could be, right now I know a lot of people, and you've seen it on our show, haven't you? Technology, typically very certain, except when you need it at that one time.
And then it's out. And then we know for sure that's when it's not going to be working. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense.
You got it. Cool. All right. And it's interesting because that actually happened to me a couple of times today. I had to do, restarts. The problem is you're relying on it. Like, it's not a problem if you know you can't rely on it, but I've been relying on it and suddenly it's not there. And I haven't planned for it. I haven't accounted for it. There's no plan B. I've got no time buffer built in. It's the uncertainty, right? These things start to add layers is when they start to have impact. All right. So complexity. Complexity is from a lack of simplicity. What you end up with is numerous connected parts. Now, that sounds like a feature, not a benefit, but when you have numerous connected parts, you've got greater risk of any one of those parts breaking down and the impact of any part breaking down having a bigger impact on the whole system. So the more parts, the more connected they are, right, the greater impact of any one of them failing or being out of whack.
This is why NASA tries to eliminate different components to try and build it into less components that do multiple things, because it's easier to produce that one component and build in redundancy in one component than it is hundreds of millions of them.
Absolutely.
So, okay, that makes sense. So like when you talk about this, I think about, my VUCA thing, bees, right? There's
right.
3 castes or 3 types of bees in a hive. There's a queen, there's drones, and then there's worker bees. And the worker bees do a whole bunch of stuff. So they basically maintain the hive. And the queen, if she's not doing her job, they boot her and replace her, right? And the drones are only there for one purpose, so that's why they multiply a bunch of them. And then in the fall, they boot them out because they're not worthwhile. Just kind of like those mail cards that you were talking about.
There you go. So is that complex or simple then?
That's more simple, but they do a lot of complex things. So maybe tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so this one's interesting. So the fact that it's intricate and complicated. So if one thing can do many things, that only works if I have more of that one thing. So if I have one Swiss Army knife in my pocket and I forget it today, I'm out of 12 functions.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that is complex and not simple. So in order to create something that is more simple, sometimes you have to separate those connected parts.
Okay. So which one, and maybe we're not talking about application of this concept again, but maybe we'll get there. That one sounds like really interesting to me. Like you could 6 one, half a dozen the other, and if it's a baker's dozen, you can throw one up in the air, and see what sticks. But complexity versus simplicity, I would imagine it really depends on the situation.
It does. And it's a question of whether or not we're defining it or trying to work on improving it. So if the thing is complex, it is, right? It's intricate, it's complicated. We need to understand it. Now, if we're going to do something with it, it helps to find the simplicity.
So, okay, we'll have to come back to that one. I got lots of thoughts going through my head. In my simple brain,
perfect.
My very simple brain is also being very complex.
And that's a problem for you. I totally get that. You're off your mark. I get it. All right, so let's go to ambiguous. Ambiguous, result of a choice not being made. Now we have multiple meanings. Things are unclear and exact. As a result, it's open to interpretation. It is the opposite of objective.
My favorite, subjective, shades of gray.
So, Brad, what do you think? What is the impact of something being subjective, especially if we're adding in some of these other elements as well?
Well, when it's subjective, you're not basing things off of data and numbers. Numbers are true, right? Numbers, unless created incorrectly, which is a previous thing. But if you're looking at making decisions based on pure numbers, numbers do not lie, right? So it's a black and white decision. But if you don't have that breadth of data, or when you talk about the accuracy and precision, if you're getting into statistics and you don't have those numbers, now you're essentially doing a gut check or a guess. So there is a lot of ambiguity in whether or not that your decision will work or not.
Very nice.
Am I on the right path here?
I would say absolutely. And then if I don't evaluate the result of my decision, I might actually be adding ambiguity to ambiguity. So, I'm making an ambiguous choice or a choice in an ambiguous situation. But if I don't also have a theory or a prediction or a hypothesis that I'm testing in the process, I don't know how good my gut is. So if I'm lacking data and I'm going on my gut, but I don't have a predicted outcome and compare expectation to outcome, then I'm never refining that skill, that ability. Like my gut might be wrong and I might never know.
Data.
Data.
The thing.
Data is the thing. The data is the thing in which we will catch the conscience of the king. I don't think I did that right, but I think we're on the right track. All right, so Brad, let's go back to the top of the order. Since we've kind of identified some of these things exist, I think let's have some fun with our sketching. All right, so my prediction or my theory, one of my theories, is that these things, that's my hypothesis. My hypothesis is that each of these exists in nature already, i.e. these are not all man-made, right? Volatility is not a human construct, neither is uncertainty, complexity, or ambiguity. I want to test that theory, prove that hypothesis by asking you to tell me, identify a place where that thing already is, or already exists in the natural world, and so we can take a little bit of the edge off of the fact that we made it this way, because we didn't. It was already there.
Gotcha. So with volatility, and I suppose you don't want me to reuse the examples I already had.
You can if you need to. Your call. Your call.
Volatility would be, we talked a lot about natural disasters and happening with speed. We could talk about earthquakes. We could talk about, and those are like instantaneous. Right?
Yeah, I like it.
The other thing, if we're talking about naturally occurring stuff that happens all the time.
Yep.
Just volatility, right? Like I'm adding all of these layers together in my head, which is making it really, really hard.
Well, you know what? Let's jump ahead for a second then. What you're identifying already is the fact that I'd say it's rare or not common to have only one of these features, right? I actually had to work pretty hard to figure out how do I define each of these as a discrete element from others, because ambiguous things are often uncertain. Complex things are often therefore volatile. So you're going to find some things in your thinking already, and you're already 3 steps ahead as usual, that something that is one of these things is often others as well. So whatever metaphor you come up with, I'm sure it'll also cover other ideas, which I'm sure are going to help our viewers understand where they can identify these situations around them anyway. So don't worry if it's also other things. I think you're still fine.
Yeah, I mean, we could look at like a waterfall as being very volatile, right?
Interesting.
Because there's a destructive force on the bottom of the waterfall, right? That creates a pit and a turbulent area underneath the surface that we see when the water hits the ground, and the higher it is and the deeper it goes, the more volatile it gets. So it's almost like a cascading effect, right?
I like it. And then we've got the churn, right? Or the back spray and all these other things. Yep. I like that. Okay, we'll go with the waterfall. The waterfall as volatile. All right. Give me, what do you got for uncertainty? Indefinite, unknown, cannot be relied on.
I mean, the funny one in this equation is the weather person or the weatherman, right? Even though they have all these tools. So weather is very uncertain, even though we have some data. But I want to save that one. I want to save that one for, I think, a later one. So uncertainty. The other piece as we dissect this is I'm also looking at this, that perspective comes into play with this. So if we're looking at this purely from a human standpoint, right, then there's a bunch of uncertainty in nature. For example, like when we look at bees and their flight paths, we don't really know where they're flying or why they're flying. And so it's very uncertain from my perspective. But from the hive mind, it's not uncertain at all. It's very much planned and intentional. So does that work for you?
Yeah, let's go with that. So we got the flight pattern of a bee.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what I got. Let's see. Bee. Bees are they three section, 3 body, 3 part?
Yep.
Right. Technically, what does that makes them an insect? Is that right?
Yes. 6 legs, head, thorax, abdomen. They fly. Yep.
I'm gonna give it a stinger because I think that's important here for a bunch of different reasons.
Yep. You
Um,
want to put some stripes on there too?
yeah, I think we have to, don't we? I think that makes it
Yeah, it's a honeybee. Yeah.
honeybee. Is there a honey wasp? I don't know what I got in my yard. I can't tell if it's a honey wasp or just a regular wasp that I should be wary of.
You know, if there's no children on here, those wasps and yellow jackets we call jerks or a-holes, but you know.
Good to know. All right. So see if I got it.
They're still good for the planet. I want to be sure. Let's know the difference and understand that all pollinators are good for the planet. We need them. Without them, we don't exist. So.
Got it. All right. So equal. So the more you know. Brian. By the way, we need a soundboard to be able to throw the more you know like star across. So we'll upgrade for future.
I like that.
All right. So uncertain, indefinite. We're not sure where he's going. Following him might be difficult. Cannot be relied on. I like it. All right. Complexity. Intricate, complicated, numerous connected parts.
I mean, they talk about the Amazon rainforest probably being the highest neural network that actually exists in the world because their root system and everything in that ecosystem is highly complex. You know, inside of a hive, a colony of honeybees, that is also very complex. All of the pieces are part of a larger ecosystem just inside of that colony and inside of that hive, and then you go outside of it and there's actually an ecosystem up to 7 miles around it, right? It's all very much lots of different variables interconnected.
All right, I'm gonna do a tree in general to represent the forest. But I like the idea that you put a bunch of these together and they all work together. I guess let's give it at least 2 trees. Let's give it 2. It works for me.
I think you should put a shrubbery in there too, and maybe some flowers.
A shrubbery?
A shrubbery.
Very nice. Did we ever, so we're making all these movie references. Did we get anybody on the last one? It's a slider.
I don't know.
Oh,
Mr.
gosh.
Omig, do you want to chime in and let us know if we've got anybody on that one?
Did we get any, did we send any swag for our last movie reference? I'm a little worried we didn't.
No one has guessed it yet.
Man, all right, well then we'll add another one. A shrubbery.
Oh, it's a
It
shrubbery.
can't be done.
Sketchy Ideas, weird business ideas, and Michael and Brad trying to do their best impersonations of classic movies.
Classic movies that should be in your queue. Okay, so we've got our rainforest. I feel like this waterfall is now underwhelming. I need to add more waterfall. All right, there we go. And oh gosh, well, we'll have to be creative. So ambiguity. The choice has not been made, therefore we still have multiple meanings. It's unclear, it's inexact, it's still open to interpretation.
Choice has not been made in nature, but you're talking about a choice, right? So in nature, that's why this is where I was going to use the weatherman, but we're talking about naturally occurring things that are not human-made. So, you know, my favorite choices made in nature are when like the Super Bowl comes out and they put like plates of food that are marked with like who's going to win the Super Bowl, and they have the octopus shoes or they have the dog shoes, or you know, like is that what we're going with, like?
I think that could be. So let me think about that for a second. So it's interesting. All right. So the interpretation part, I agree. So we might have to fudge that because interpretation implies that word you came up with earlier, which is perspective, which I think is a key feature of all the things that we're talking about here. Based on your perspective, things might be more or less volatile, more or less uncertain, more or less complex, more or less ambiguous. So I guess we have to assume that the thing in nature has an other that is interpreting. Maybe the choice not made doesn't work out in nature necessarily, but the meaning is unclear. It is still open to interpretation. It's not a done deal.
Only one joke comes to mind. Why did the chicken cross the road?
You know what? That's perfect. That's the chicken and the egg. Well done. You didn't even know what you were doing. Look at that. All right, now I gotta draw chicken and an egg. All right, let's see here. Chicken gets a body.
For all of those viewers out there who want to see Brad blanking on like not having a clue, you
that
just
right
got
there.
it.
That was the moment. All right, chicken
Deer
gets
in
a
headlight.
wing, gets the feet, but he also needs his egg. All right. There you go. There's your chicken egg. Not bad. Like it? All right.
No, I like it.
So the volatile waterfall, the uncertain bee flight path, the complex rainforest, and the ambiguous chicken egg. Actually, chicken egg is perfect. That's like the ultimate of ambiguity.
Yeah. So
that's perfect. Well
done. Tell me a little bit about it. All right. So we went through these concepts. Hey, friends, we flew through these. Michael just dropped a whole bunch of thoughts and sketchy ideas on you that you can apply and look at and use. Now, the challenge I would ask is Michael, we're going to go into this more next week. Tell me, right? We're going to dive into each of these a little bit and potentially have a guest on who's going to walk us through some of this stuff. All right. Because here's the deal. We are now living in this new normal of a world, and as much as we can be hopeful for some sort of solution that's going to make it all go away, friends, I got news for you. Like, even if we get a vaccine in the next 2 to 3 months that works, it's not gonna fix the world overnight, and we are going to be living in this ambiguity of not knowing what's going to happen for probably the next 6 to 12 months minimum. So what that means is you got people at work who are going through this. All this stuff happens in somebody's head. It happens with your clients. It happens with your customers. It happens with your suppliers. It happens with all your partners and colleagues in your network. It happens with the big companies we rely on, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in the news that's going to cause some changes, especially for those of you who are doing marketing and sales. It's going to cause a lot of problems with ecosystem for all those eco-entrepreneurs out there or ecopreneurs out there. There's a lot of changes that are going to be coming because of this. And so all of these things that Michael's going through, we have a website coming called sketchyideashow.com. We're going to drop some more of this stuff out there, and we're going to build on this over the next probably few weeks. So you've got some resources that you can tap into.
Absolutely.
Because I really think that if you're not looking at this literally from a perspective and trying to remove emotion from it in the way that this framework helps with, you're going to be VUCA-ing all over the place. You
got it. You nailed it. And you know what? Because of that, let me give a quick little bonus content. Here's what it is. I did the why, the what, the so what. I know we're at time, but let me give you this. Okay, Michael, what do I do about it? I'm glad you asked. Number one, recognize what's happening. Like, give it the name. That looks like volatility. This seems complex. Cool. From that, you can objectify it a little bit and then seek the solution. So I'm experiencing volatility, seek stability. I'm experiencing uncertainty, look for things that can be more specific. If things are complex, look for simplicity. If things are ambiguous, make a choice.
There you go.
Recognize it's happening, what you're saying, do something about it.
Is the one thing human beings really need, and this has been dissected in psychology, is we have to define things. We have to name things. Why we name our dog, why we name our male cars or female cars, based on characteristics and traits. Why we have there's a whole science on nomenclature, right? When you talk about the animal kingdom and everything in the middle, right? Like genus, species, name. We have to do that as human beings because it helps us remove the lizard brain from it to be able to diagnose and look at it from a rational perspective to make a quality decision or choice when we need it.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Michael,
that's huge. So, Brian Omig, did we miss anything? The voice from God, let's hear it.
Right.
Like usual, he doesn't call back to me.
No, not on our timetable. Well,
right.
that's okay. So that's part one. Part two next week, we hope to say, what do we do? Like a little more on what do we do about it, right? What's the impact? How do we address it, especially as leaders of teams, owners of businesses, somebody that other people look to for what do I do now? We're going to help you next week with figure out, okay, what do I do now about this? And Brad's going to give us some of that content when we get into it next week.
Yep. And even if you're thinking about it in terms of your family unit, this is a big deal.
Leader of others, you got it.
So with that, hey, we'll see you next week. We're going to dive into this some more. Michael's going to challenge me. He's probably going to make me draw on the whiteboard, which we all know is very simple and very ambiguous. So we already got 2 traits there. We even can call it uncertain, and sometimes my drawings are volatile. So we can call Brad Sketchy Ideas VUCA if we want. So with that, we'll see you next week. And remember, if you have questions or anything, right now, email us at sketchyideas@ccmediagroup.co. That's ccmediagroup.co. And we'll get back to you with any questions. We are looking and bringing on a whole slew of guests in the upcoming months. And we're working hard to pull in some critical people for you. But until then, take care. And remember, just because it's a sketchy idea doesn't mean it's not worth exploring. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Take care.